let's talk about Yevgeny Prigozhin. He was the instigator of the Russian coup about a week ago. Michael Snyder reports, when Yevgeny Prigozhin launched his short-lived rebellion, many in the Western media were describing it as a coup. Of course it was a coup. But the truth is that Prigozhin did not intend to try to overthrow Vladimir Putin. He just wanted his seat at the table back. Being in Vladimir Putin's good graces had turned Prigozhin into an exceedingly wealthy man over the years. But now everything was changing. Prigozhin was in danger of losing everything that he had worked to build, and the final straw was a decision to break up the Wagner group and absorb those troops into the Russian military. Prigozhin realized that he was being sidelined, and so in a desperate attempt to get some leverage, he hatched an ill-fated plan to kidnap Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and General Valery Gerasimov. Unfortunately for Prigozhin, they learned of his scheme in advance, and their travel plans were changed. When he realized that his scheme had failed, Prigozhin was willing to make a deal because ultimately he did not want to see his fighters slaughtered in a pointless conflict. Before becoming world famous as the head of Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin was making tremendous amounts of money as a caterer. He had been given extremely lucrative contracts to provide food for the Moscow school system and for Russian military bases, and that gave him a position among Russia's elite. Of course, running the Wagner Group had been a tremendous source of wealth for Prigozhin as well. In fact, his two businesses had combined to bring in nearly $2 billion in revenue over the past year. So he's a billionaire, as you can understand. President Vladimir Putin said Tuesday the financiers of Wagner mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin's catering firm would be investigated after his mutiny, saying Wagner and his founder had received almost $2 billion from Russia in the past year. Unfortunately for Prigozhin, in recent months he started to fall out of favor. He had been recruiting fighters for the Wagner Group in prisons all over Russia, but the government put a stop to that. Now the Russian military is recruiting in those prisons, and that absolutely infuriated Prigozhin. Another thing that greatly upset Prigozhin was when his good friend General Sergei Surovikin was replaced as top commander of operations in Ukraine by General Valery Gerasimov. Prigozhin always had a lot of respect for Surovikin, but he utterly detests Gerasimov. Since then, tensions between Prigozhin and the Russian military brass just continued to rise, and that led to a fateful decision on June 10th. On that date, it was announced that all soldiers of the Wagner Group would be required to sign a contract with the military of Russia by July 1st. Essentially, the plan was for the Wagner Group to be absorbed, and Prigozhin realized that he would be losing his private army. He appealed to Putin, but Putin sided with the military brass, and that was the final straw for Prigozhin. And so he hatched a plan to kidnap Gerasimov, the defense minister Sergei Shoigu, in a desperate attempt to get some leverage on Putin. But as CNN explained, news of Prigozhin's ill-fated plan got out ahead of time. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin planned to seize two top Russian military officials when he launched a short-lived mutiny on Saturday. The Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday, citing Western officials. Prigozhin's plot involved the capture of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and top Army General Valery Gerasimov when the pair visited a region along the border of Ukraine. According to Wall Street Journal reports, Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, learned of the plot 2 days before it was due to take place, forcing Prigozhin to change his plans at the last minute and launch a march towards Moscow instead, according to the report. Prigozhin quickly realized that he was holding a losing hand, and he clearly understood that if he continued his rebellion, he would soon end up not being among us. So he made the best deal that he could under the circumstances, but that certainly is not what leaders in the Western world were hoping for. They were hoping that Prigozhin's rebellion would spark an uprising that would lead to the overthrow of Vladimir Putin. Of course, the truth is that was never what Prigozhin intended. Prigozhin's rebellion was not a bid for power or an attempt to overtake the Kremlin. Tatiana Stanovaya, senior fellow at Carnegie Russia, Eurasia Center wrote in an analysis of the events, "It arose from a sense of desperation. Prigozhin was forced out of Ukraine and found himself unable to sustain Wagner the way he did before, while the state machinery was turning against him. Most Americans don't realize this, but Vladimir Putin is far, far more popular inside Russia than Joe Biden is in the United States. There is not going to be any sort of a popular uprising against Putin because most of the population is solidly behind him, and most Russians are not against the war in Ukraine either. If anything, most Russians want Putin to take the gloves off and start a much stronger stance against Ukraine. But you aren't going to hear any of this from politicians in the Western world. They're going to use Prigozhin's rebellion as evidence that what they are doing is working. In fact, earlier this week, Joe Biden boldly declared that Putin is clearly losing the war in Iraq. Yes, he actually did say that. Needless to say, he actually meant that Putin is losing the war in Ukraine, but that is not actually accurate either. Over the past several weeks, the Ukrainians lost hundreds of vehicles and thousands upon thousands of men in a very foolish counteroffensive that has basically accomplished nothing. The Russians are quite content to fight a war of attrition right now because they believe that time is on their side. Sadly, the reality of the matter is that time is running out for all of us. Both sides just continue to escalate matters, and that will eventually result in the United States and Russia fighting one another directly. We should be trying to avoid such a scenario at all costs because such a conflict would almost certainly lead to nuclear war. Once nukes start flying, millions of people are going to die, but there are no peace marches in major U.S. cities right now, and that is because the American people simply do not understand what we're facing. And this is by Michael Snyder. He says about the author, "My name is Michael, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters, Commissions Earned. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies to families as gifts to families and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've also started a brand new Substack newsletter, and I encourage you to subscribe so that you won't miss any of the latest updates. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the most important news. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The materials contained in this article are for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media at Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is on End of the American Dream by Michael Snyder. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.